Hello, my name is Taher Mahmud. I'm a consultant rheumatologist involved with London Osteoporosis Clinic, U Optimized, and Global Osteoporosis Foundation. It's a real treat to have an incredible guest who's got amazing experience in the field of sort of academia and business and coaching and so on. Professor Wittenberg-Cox. Professor Wittenberg-Cox, please just show us a little bit about the kind of things that you do to have more out of your day, and the things that you sort of evolved or included in your activities to get to be as productive as you are, and the things that you found particularly helpful in that regard.
Well, I think a good part of my every day is meeting and talking with interesting people, which is exactly what we're doing right now. I have found that there are a number of ways of doing that. One, obviously, is reading. I read a lot, both fiction. I run a podcast, just like you, so I get to invite and interview all kinds of interesting people. I'm a consultant, so I also work with companies. So I'm usually in conversation with a number of larger organizations, accompanying them usually on my two key topics, which are gender and generational balance. Mm-hmm. And I try and do what doctors like you want me to do, which is exercise every day, a little bit more with every year that goes by.
Yeah.
And I like to have a lot of time with friends and family, and keep some time in the agenda for chatting with my children who live far away.
Yeah. I mean, you're emphasizing that sort of social connection. That really is incredibly critical for our well-being, isn't it? In terms of, bring meaning to our time, and sort of context in terms of, having the privilege to do all the things that we're able to do, and so on.
One of the last things maybe I could add, one of the things I find extremely helpful for productivity, but also just for self-understanding, is I write a weekly blog on Substack, or a newsletter, that kind of digests my week. Who did I meet? What did I learn? What did I read? And I find it an extraordinarily useful discipline to sit down every Sunday morning and kind of digest what happened, what I learned, what I feel this week, and have a record of it that evolves over time. It's very useful exercise.
Yeah. So that's another sort of thing. When we're explaining something to somebody else, we study it, and I know with a greater level of curiosity, or a slightly different perspective than just for ourselves. So and keeping a record and summary of what we're doing, it has enormous benefits, and you will see that you're sort of building on so many different layers on, and the detail of different sort of topics over time, and it's a real advantage for everybody who has access to that to make use of all the sort of interest and understanding that you bring to those sorts of topics. So if we're in a state of service or sharing stuff with people, I think it makes a big difference, doesn't it?
It does.
So just in terms of your sort of average day then, so what would is there a sort of set of things that you find are particularly useful? I might just share a story with you, which I haven't really mentioned much before. The idea of this podcast came from a young chap who was organizing a meeting, and he was doing his studying, he was organizing some work for his dad's business, and he was very sort of productive and effective, and I was curious to know what he was doing to get so much out of his day. What sort of things that you find have helped you over the years in terms of having that sort of, and the ultimate game is this sort of human connection, this sort of appreciation of what's going on around us, and to be able to just sort of share that journey. But there are lots of other elements to it. So what sort of things have you found particularly helpful in terms of getting more out of your day and so on?
Well, I'd say one is variety. I don't have a typical day. Every day is very different. Over the years, I've traveled a lot. I find that cultural experiences have been a huge part of what I do and where I do it. And I find that different cultures and countries have such different ways and such similar ways of approaching some of my favorite topics that it's kind of endlessly interesting and endlessly educational to, observe human nature in different cultural contexts. So I'd say that's a huge one. I regularly teach. I actually also regularly go back to school. I think it's really nice to go back and learn new things over and over again. My 60th birthday gift to myself was a year back at school. So never too late and always keep going would be my other. And then just read voraciously. I spend some time every day, both reading and writing. And I find that's just...
Yeah, just as a particular focus to your day and so on. So just in terms of your sort of habits, is there a particular time you get up? Is there sort of a particular set of routines that you follow just to sort of get you in that sort of state of being really present? And is there any little things that you might be able to share with us and we can benefit from?
So now at my age, with my portfolio career where I do a multiplicity of things, I have a much stricter and also freer rhythm than I used to. Let me just drink that away. I sleep a lot, so you're going to like that. I sleep 8, 9, sometimes 10 hours a night. I usually try and make that pretty standard, so I get up late, maybe 8, 9 o'clock. I usually block mornings to do quiet work, serious work, researching. If I'm not out with clients or traveling, that's when I do all my writing, thinking. I usually try and do some exercise around lunchtime. So whether I'm out in the country and do a hike, I find hiking after doing some thinking. So I think, I work, you got some ideas going around, then you go for a hike. I walk for an hour or two if I can, if I have the time, not every day. And I find that really anchors. I mean, it's so creative to all the ideas. I don't even have to be thinking about what I was working on, but somehow ideas come, or insights or conclusions emerge after doing that, which I always find quite amazing. And then I'm usually like on calls in conversation all afternoon, usually a lot of it nowadays on Zoom, and you have to travel a lot less. So one of my goals is to travel a lot less in this next chapter of life. I've spent a lot of time on planes. The joy of, the pandemic related shift to Zoom is huge. And so, most of my afternoons are spent talking to a lot of people like this.
Yeah, and amazing. So because I think we're better at making decisions earlier in the day, possibly, especially if you've got a structure to your day in terms of getting up at the same sort of time. And sleep is so critical, isn't it? And if you can have enough sleep and be really rejuvenated, and then you sort of do your highest value stuff in the beginning, and then mix it up with a bit of exercise, because that sort of refreshes your whole system and so on. And
one of the great joys of being empty nest is, one, you miss your kids, but they call you a lot. And two is you can sleep in, like usually for the first time in your life, right? The post-child sleep facility is extraordinarily welcome.
I think you're right, because I think sometimes we are a little bit frantic and we're just sort of, and business isn't necessarily the most productiveness, as it were. So, and then when we sort of change tasks and so on, especially when we're doing some exercise, it's a good way of sort of making all sorts of connections and new ideas and so on. So, your productivity and creativity just multiplies, doesn't it?
I think it does. Although I remember, listen, I wrote all my books when I was still parenting, and I remember just getting up earlier and doing a bit of writing from 7:30 to 9 every morning before the kids would go, just after the kids had gotten on a bus to go to school and before the work day. I mean, there's always ways to squeeze it in, but it's sure that you miss out on some of the repose that you can enjoy a little bit later in life.
So just having that sort of structure and sort of properly ring fencing focus time, obviously helps you, because then you got to do something, otherwise it gets a bit sort of buffeted about with your other demands. So obviously you do these incredible different activities, and share your insights and so on. Are there things that you're working on now that that you're looking to explore, or there's already a particular sort of area in terms of your time or your productivity? Or I mean, I know you're sort of pretty peak at your sort of productivity as well, but there are sort of other things you're curious about.
Well, I've sort of totally shifted a little bit my current focus from where I've spent 20-odd years working on gender balance in the business world. And a few years ago, really during the pandemic, I shifted gradually to layering on that an interest in the shifting demographics of the world, the new longevity, and how to get people to transition a bit more mindfully and intentionally from what I call the second quarter of 100-year lives, the 25 to 50 years, into the third quarter, the 50 to 75 years, and how to stay all the things that you are supporting, healthy, active, engaged in the world, in communities, doing things, giving, not necessarily financially anymore, not necessarily for the same reasons as you were earlier, but to have purpose and a mission in life. So these are all the things that I explore through all the different things I do, whether it's teaching, interviewing role models, thinkers in this space. There are a lot of them. And looking at it, I mean, what I find interesting about this topic is it's huge. It's up there with AI and climate change in terms of what its impact on our world will be. And my personal interest in it is how holistic it is. It's very transversal. It impacts countries, companies, couples, careers, consumers. You can go on and on. And I like all of those different strands. And I've just, for example, co-directed a program in a business school in Portugal called Longevity Leadership to try and get leaders of large organizations together to understand how this will impact their businesses and their markets.
That's amazing, because that's the value of that, or the impact of that is just beyond scale, isn't it? Because through these sort of mechanisms and the stuff that you're doing, and the sort of curiosity that you could bring to organizations and people to bring to this subject, can have a really transformational effect everywhere, can't it? Because and this retirement thing is a bit sort of, it's got positives and negatives, but on the whole, you're really, sometimes, you're at the peak of your capabilities, and all of a sudden you're retiring. It's like, you can change your focus and maybe do different things, but you are, if you continue to be physically and mentally learning and growing and all those sorts of things, then you don't necessarily need to, you could change roles, but you don't have to necessarily stop thinking and being active. I mean, what's your thinking on that?
Well, absolutely. Listen, I'm surrounded by a growing number of people who don't like the word retirement, don't consider it. I've been fortunate enough to always work for myself, so the idea, and run my own businesses and companies, so the idea of retirement is pretty self-directed or inflicted. I mean, and I'm very flexible in terms of how much I work or how little. And so I don't think I'll ever retire. I mean, I don't understand that notion. I think it will certainly shift what I do, how much of it I do, where I do it, but I don't think I'll ever stop doing something, and learning and growing and giving forward. There's so many issues and challenges in the world, and I think a lot of older people in what I call the Q3 years are uniquely positioned to share the hard-earned wisdom and knowledge that they've accumulated. How to do it, where to do it is part of the transition challenges that we face. But retire, no way.
And that sort of Q3 cohort of people who have a lot of skills and a lot of advice and guidance and mentorship that they can provide. I mean, what are your sort of thinking, or the things that you're discussing? Whatever you can share with us. How do you see that? Because we're in the same sort of situation. We want people to be curious about their health, take some tactical stuff, maybe some small things, and then other stuff beyond that. But that sort of ability to advocate and to get people to be curious about a given topic, whatever that might be. How and you have this incredible experience of having access to people who are making decisions that not only impact them but their whole organization or their whole country. How are you finding that? Are people interested? What are they proactive? What are the learnings from there that we can all benefit from in terms of message sharing and so on?
Listen, I think we've all been formatted by the past. That's our biggest challenge. So we're all used to the way our parents live their lives, the way our elders live their lives, and we are formatted into this old 3-stage life of learn, work, retire. And we're all brainwashed that way. And all the systems in our countries are normed along that pattern. That's how all of our institutions are run, whether it's learning institutions and universities, whether it's companies and when they think people should be active and working, whether it's our pension systems and whether you're able to work or not work much later. So all these things are designed for an era which I think is obsolete. It just doesn't make sense anymore. Now we're in an era of longevity, so people are going to be working much longer. My model for this is that we're now going to be living these 4-quarter lives, where the really new piece, I think, is this 3rd quarter that I suspect both you and I are in, which are these 25 years after 50, which are newly healthy, active, potentially engaged. And so how many people listen to this message? Well, more and more the people who start to enter this time. The earlier you're prepared for it, just like your bones, the earlier you strengthen up and lean into the reality of Q3. If we can get people in Q2 to know that Q3 exists, they have a much smoother preparation and transition into it. If they don't know and you suddenly realize at 60, when you're getting nudged out of your company, that you don't know what you want to do next, it takes you some time, usually a few years, to explore your options, move, and then you have a slightly shorter runway of the time ahead to do a lot of things. So the message is probably exactly like yours. As the earlier, and we have to start giving this in children's books, right? We have to start educating this next generation who will live to be 100. That they're going to have much longer lives, much longer careers, and so they can pace themselves differently, which I hope will include, have the kids they're no longer having. Take some time out to be young parents, not quite so frazzled as our generation were, because you have a much longer time frame and you don't want to burn out and you want to be able to pace yourself slightly differently. But we're up against a work world that isn't adapted to this reality. And so that's part of what people like me are trying to do, is to get the work world to adjust to these new lives and to much more generationally balanced workforces. I always ask companies, what's the balance between your over 50 and under 50 employees? What does it look like? Do you know? Are you managing that balance?
What is it? Obviously it depends on given situation and so on, but is it a particular sort of mix or a broad mix to try and go for? Because that work balance is an interesting concept, and yet maybe most people don't know about that. But is it a sort of like a mix to have, or it just depends? And people need to be curious first, and then they can try and fine tune stuff, perhaps.
I think the issue is it's happening. It's just we're not looking at it. So the world is aging. Countries are aging, therefore workforces are aging, therefore the pipeline of young people is shrinking because fertility rates are dropping all over the place. This replacement ratios are well down below replacement ratios. So countries are shrinking, economies will shrink. The only place we will keep our workforces filled is either immigration or making people work longer. This is not a popular notion. This is very hard for politicians to start talking about and still get elected. But it will be the inevitability of our much longer lives is we can't currently pay for them. So we'll probably have to earn a bit longer. The retirement ages are slowly but surely inching their way up. Countries are starting to link mandatory retirement ages to life expectancy in their countries. So there'll be this kind of automatic systemic adjustment going on constantly. And so it's happening. And then the question is just, are organizations managing this change? Are they even aware of it? Is it on the strategic agenda? And what we're finding is, well, not really and not yet, but it's coming.
And the levers to try and get people's interest in, I know everybody's overwhelmed and, always people are busy. But how easy or difficult is it to get people interested in this subject? I mean, from the work that you're doing, is it, governments are interested or large organizations are interested and others are less? So how are you finding that sort of landscape? Is the curiosity increasing or it's still not a focus?
I think, countries are always interested because they know that their GDPs are at stake and they know their pension systems are pretty well broke. So their finance people are always been mumbling about this for quite some time. I think the pandemic was a huge wake-up call for countries about elders generally, their health, how to protect them. I think the next step after the country level was individuals, I think, are much more onto this, particularly, again, post-pandemic. I think there's much more awareness. The mainstream media has completely raised this topic to the front pages just in the last couple of years. And I put companies probably as the laggards in this space. They are, as long as they can, still focusing on what they know and have always done, which is focus more on the young, both as consumers. They think the future. I always question them because they really think their future market are the young. So there's a lot of interest in Gen Z. When I'm suggesting their future market is going to be a bunch of very wealthy Q3ers that they're not necessarily paying quite enough attention to, neither as talent internally nor as consumers and clients externally. So that's the competitive opportunity that we're putting on their plate. And as always, it's a small group of smart, first mover companies who are usually smart first movers on everything new who are taking up this topic early.
Yeah, and that's absolutely amazing. Was there anything else that this has been a really useful thing in terms of some other sort of incredible stuff that you're doing and really get people to have this appreciation of the context that we're in and the opportunity that exists for the whole of society and the Q3 in particular. There's all sorts of different ways that you can engage with them, leverage their benefit, and get them to be more of your consumer. I mean, whether we should stop here and then come back for the other piece, or is there anything that we can learn from your work in terms of advocating for better health or get people to be more curious? Because it's the same audience, I suppose. People are people. Obviously, we're a little bit outsiders, so we don't have access to some of those sorts of touch points.
Yes, I mean, I think what's crazy is I've been researching longevity and aging for the last 5 years. Yeah. I had never heard of things like sarcopenia. I didn't know that 1 out of 2 women in the UK suffer from osteoporosis. This kind of ignorance drives me crazy. Why don't we know? Because had we known, we could have prepared much earlier. Why did I not get a DEXA scan until I was 62? And only because I asked for it, because a friend of mine got diagnosed with osteoporosis who was super fit, and I never thought she would be a candidate. So I think this kind of stuff, really easy prevention, simple screening and tests, the whole issue with moving our healthcare systems from focusing on the sick to preventing illness is absolutely key to the second. We've got 1 billion people in the world over 60 today. we will, you and I, be the 2nd billion people over 60 by 2050. And if we don't want massive healthcare problems and, ill people in our countries, we've got to get on the prevention wagon, and healthcare, health, exercise, lifestyle, and good bones. I mean, there can't be much simpler than good foundations, good bones, good nutrition, good sleep. We all know that. Why it comes across, people are kind of frantic and always looking for miracles of weird, complicated, esoteric recipes that, sound like witchcraft, when really the basics of longevity and health, as you know only too well and preach, are really quite simple, and why we can't get really robust preventive teachings from, childhood. I don't quite understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think one of the things that we're trying to do is just get people to be a little bit curious and a sense of awe about themselves. We get to be, 34 trillion cells or so, and there's an incredible number of things going on every moment, and yet it's, it works. Everything works so well, so efficiently. So we can see stuff, we can hear stuff, we can do stuff, we can, and then everything is in a state of repair. So if we understand bones included, and muscle, so if we can do things that help that rather than hinder that, and have this, wish to learn a little bit more, it would, I think, move the whole planet to a different place, rather than sort of being worrying about a whole bunch of different things, unrelated stuff, and having too many opinions. We just want to get on and, be the best that we can be.
And I think the interest of people is so high. I mean, you can see it now, even just in the UK, with Our Future Health that was launched by the UK government. I don't know, they've gotten 2 million people or something signed up for blood tests in drugstores to analyze some of their health measures. There's this Zoe app that everybody's doing, which I did with great pleasure, to learn about nutrition and your microbiome. I mean, we're heading into all kinds of new innovations in this space, which I think are great. And the measure of, do people care and are they interested? Yeah, I think they do. Now, I think the challenge will be to keep it relatively simple and not make it either expensive, inaccessible, or overly scientific.
Yeah, no, I think that's just be very relatable, and sort of, something that leads to a result very quickly, rather than overly complex or confusing. I mean, the thing that we're trying to do with the with the foundation is just have one questionnaire, and it's got about 15 or 12 different questions, and gives a little bit of insight in terms of why some of those things may be relevant to medical condition or nutrition or exercise, and then gives people a score. And the score then is broadly 3 categories. So we've got a high score or a good score, and we don't need to do too much, or you're in the middle, it's worth sort of getting some help, or if it's low, you need to get help sooner rather than later, and give them some signpost where to go. And the questionnaire has the ability to discriminate in terms of what you're like, if you have a high risk of a future fracture or osteoporosis. And that just, it's a few simple things that we can organize. We've got some other content around it. But I think the issue for us is really get interest, get the partnerships, get the collaborations going, so we can do the clinical piece. But that sort of messaging, marketing, sharing, integrating it into a whole bunch of other stuff that people have, organizations, government, and so on. So our dream is, which is a bit simple, and we don't know, we've got some ideas about the how, but we don't have the details of the how, is get everybody on the planet to do this questionnaire. And that'll give them a little bit of a read, a little bit of I get to be me, I get, this influences that, or I better not smoke, or maybe be careful about alcohol, or I need to be careful about this nutrition, and just get stuff checked. And as you say, the questionnaire can have some discriminatory value. You can do more stuff. You can do lab, you can always see a healthcare professional, you can do imaging, different things. But with any sort of process or journey, you can start with one small step, and then we can gently build stuff on, especially the higher risk people. And then have different cohorts, schools, young adults, older. And yeah, the osteoporosis, the actual numbers are very high. So is there a way of we could partner with businesses or governments, or how would we go about that, bearing in mind that we have very limited capabilities in terms of that that aspect of stuff, or links to policymakers, links to organizations and groups. We're coming from a purely clinical point of view. And our dream is that one day there won't be any osteoporosis, there won't be any bone health vulnerability, and people won't need any heroics from any clinician, and they have this all of themselves, that they are healthy and they're capable and they're ever getting stronger and better.
Well, if I were you, I'd reach out to a few people. I'd reach out to Tim Spector and ask him for advice on how did he start Zoe and why, and where did the money come from, and how did he get this app designed? I mean, he's got a couple of guys on his team that are very tech and very consumer. So I mean, creating a balanced team, I think, that is with, like you're the medical expert, and then you need the consumer and the tech experts alongside who buy into this. And I think there are a lot of great places to do it. I know the MIT Age Lab or the Stanford Longevity Center are obvious partners. I would hope that there's something equivalent in the UK, so you don't have to run to the US to do it. I don't know them, but I would imagine at Oxford, Cambridge, in that corridor somewhere, there's some longevity experts. I would talk to the International Longevity Center people. I mean, you can map out the people working in longevity. I really and I'm happy to introduce you to Nick Palmerini, who runs the UK National Innovation Center on Aging. I think they're very into any kind of innovation in the space. But I do think that technology is essential. That's the essential piece, is to get it on everybody's phone with an app. I just met the founder of something called Ear Gym. Fantastic little app that tests your hearing. If you could do something like that to test your bone strength, wouldn't it be great? I mean, and so I think really simple things like that.
Yeah. That's really valuable. And yes, I think introduction to Nick Palmerini would be helpful. And because the thing is, you need to have this broad values aligned collaboration, don't you? And then you do the bit that you can do, and everybody else does the bit they can do. And in the end, you have this incredible contribution or impact that no one's that ready to do any stuff outside of their lane, as it were, and stuff got done. But unless you get those collaborations, it remains a bit of an idea or just something, but it needs something tangible. So we're developing an app. I think it's all ready to go. We'll share it with you. We've also got some website stuff and so on. But yeah, I think it's that networks of like-minded people to collaborate and to build on.
Yeah, and I think the consumer side is really important, like in the outreach and the marketing thing. I mean, I also think you don't necessarily, I don't know what you're doing, but you don't necessarily want to be too generic in the health space. You might want to be Mr. Bone, right? Bones, healthy bones. Just make sure you got bones, and make a lot of noise about 1 out of 2 people having osteoporosis. There's so much unbelievable data. I just noticed, I think this ear gym thing is smart. Just hearing, it's huge. It has an enormous impact on brain cognitive impairment. If you start losing your hearing, you start to lose bits of your brain. And so I think that some of these things that are very focused on some part that people can understand and care about easily could also be helpful just to getting wide reach relatively quickly. I think if it's too generic, like all your health and here's lifestyle things.
Yeah, I think so the questionnaire just focuses on the bone and it's related to that. So it gives you a number. Obviously we could tweak everything and then you can make some interventions, and then you can go back and do the questionnaire, and it gives you a slightly different number, and you can give you a bit of a understanding of how you're progressing over time. But obviously, it's very very sort of general. So we're not offering any clinical advice because, people need to have that fully assessed before they can have anything specific. But I think these things would be.
I think it'd be great. I think it'd be absolutely great.